شهر الطاعة والإيمان شهر الرحمة والغفران شهر الطاعة والإيمان شهر الرحمة والغفران
أيامك خير الأيام
يا رمضان
يا شهر صيام وقيام
يا رمضان
أيامك خير الأيام
يا رمضان
يا شهر صيام وقيام
يا رمضان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Inshallah, for tonight's session and tomorrow night's session we shall be covering some theological aspects and dimensions of the recent phenomenon of the coronavirus. Now, this has affected most, if not everyone, in the world, and it has posed many theological questions. And for those who are theologically empty, meaning that they haven't mastered, they haven't studied properly, they've always taken religion for granted, such phenomena poses questions, and if they're not ready to answer them, or they don't have the means to answer them, it causes a lot of spiritual problems within. These unanswered questions, or questions which are answered inaccurately, causes many problems for people. And it's the people's fault, i.e. those who don't study properly. We have a duty in relation to our children, so that from 7 years of age onwards, we have to outline a program of study so that they can master religion over time. But if they keep on mastering only the rituals of Islam without paying heed to the doctrine of Islam, over time this will manifest in the most negative of ways, and they won't be able to handle many issues that arise in the world. One of those is the coronavirus, and this has posed many questions, and so inshallah for one or two sessions I want to go through certain theological aspects and see how exactly should we view such phenomena, namely the coronavirus, and inshallah we'll take things step by step. The first point which needs mentioning is that according to many verses in the Holy Quran, whatever exists in the realm of creation, which in our discussions primarily focus on the physical realm of creation, but it also includes the semi-immaterial and immaterial realms of creation, which are also forms of creation. But for our purposes, we shall mainly be discussing phenomena in this physical realm of creation. In any case, whatever exists in the realm of creation, in and of itself, now be it a thing or an action or whatever we see, is good. Now, the Quran refers to this, and our Tawheedi worldview points to this. In the Holy Quran there are several verses in this regard. In chapter 32, verse 7, الَّذِي أَحْسَنَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَهُ, that Allah has made good, or has made most good, that which He has created. Everything that He's created, He's assigned as good. He's made good. Or in chapter 40, verse 7, رَبَّنَا وَسِئْتَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ رَحْمَةً. O Allah, you've encompassed all things in mercy. All things. You see, the universality of these verses show that whatever exists in the realm of creation is good. It's all mercy. Chapter 3, verse 191. وَيَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. That they deliberate on the creation of the heavens and the earth, saying, O our Lord, you haven't created anything, and the creation of the heavens and the earth, nothing of it is created in vain. Nothing is futile. It's all your creation. You've made it good. It's all your mercy. Nothing is in vain. Or in chapter 30, verse 8, ما خلق الله السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إلا بالحق. That you haven't created the heavens and the earth and that which is in between them, إلا بالحق, save that it is through haqq. It's all true. It's all the truth. It's all reality. And we've explained what this preposition in the phrase بالحق means. That the bar preposition, it's the bar of fabric. So the very fabric, the very stuff from which the heavens and the earth and everything is made out of, it's the very stuff is reality. It's all reality, it's all existence. Now, and there are many other verses. So look, with these verses we see that when we look at anything, and actions or things when they manifest in the realm of existence, anything is good. When we look at it in and of itself, it's a creation. Allah is the creator, therefore it has to be good. Now, when we say Allah, Allah is a name. What's the reality underlying this name? What the theologians call Allah, the philosophers call pure existence. Pure existence. Not existence in a particular shape or form or limitation. No. Pure existence. Ayatollah Hassanzadeh has a book on called Gnosis of the Soul. And in the first page of the first chapter, out of almost 150 chapters, he writes, that which is perceived is existence. We exist, and other than us, whatever is, exists. We are nothing but existence, have nothing but existence, and see nothing but existence. The opposite of existence is non-existence, which is not, is nothingness, does not exist. It is not anything, and so cannot be perceived in the first place. This nothingness is not anything, so nothingness can't be perceived in the first place. It can't be sensed. Even discussing or conceiving, mentally conceiving it, even mentally conceiving nothingness, can only be done under the umbrella of existence. Existence is the source of and the origin to an infinite vast array of emanations, actualizations and manifestations. Whatever emanates, actualizes or manifests in reality must have done so through existence, not non-existence. Non-existence can't manifest, can't actualize. This principle is the most self-evident of principles. In short, other than existence, there is nothing. All is, and all manifestations arise through existence. Existence runs the order of the universe, rather it is the universe per se. Now, look what he calls, what Ayatollah Hasanzadeh calls the most self-evident principle. This underlies our Tawheed, which is the most important article of faith. And Islam is based on Tawheed. Everything in Islam comes from Tawheed. And Tawheed sees Allah as pure existence. Nothing can be Allah free, nothing can be existence free. Everything depends on Allah, everything depends on existence. But I am a manifestation of existence. I only manifest existence. I am not me or any other thing. We are just manifestations of existence. Otherwise, the one existent being is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else is just manifesting Allah. Everything else has no independent reality of its own. Everything else, its reality is through that independent reality of pure existence. So when you look at Allah in this way, whatever Allah is good, pure existence is good. Any attribute of perfection you see anywhere around you in your surroundings, it comes from pure existence. And therefore it has to be good. Because it comes from pure existence. When you look at it in and of itself, it's not independently arising by its own self. It's merely a manifestation of pure existence. And in this physical realm of existence, for example, which is infinite and has no end, all the attributes of perfection that you encounter emanate from pure existence. So pure existence beholds, contains, possesses all these attributes, infinite attributes of perfection. And so whatever comes out into this creative order of the cosmos is from pure existence, is manifesting it. And so evil can't exist. Evil, no thing in and of itself can be called evil, can be called bad. And as we'll go through, these lectures, inshallah, we would come to this realization that terms such as evil or vice, these are mental constructs. And we'll speak more about that as we go through. So the point is, whatever we encounter, when you look at it in and of itself, it's good. Now there are many questions may arise here. What about when someone kills somebody? How are you going to view that? Do you call it good or not? It depends how you look at it. The action itself is a creation of Allah. It wasn't realized independently without Allah's will. Yes, on a legislative level, on a do and don'ts level, where what Allah legislates, that action, that killing or stabbing or lying or cheating is not on a par with Allah's satisfaction, and the person who carries it out becomes more distanced from Allah. This becoming more distanced from Allah, this has been assigned the name or expression of bad or evil. But it's nothing to do with the realm of creation. That person in the realm of his soul is being more and more distanced from Allah. true, this becoming more and more distanced from Allah is on a par with that person's perfection. That person is becoming more and more perfect, but in vice, not in virtue. Everyone and everything, moment to moment, is progressing towards perfection, more and more. No one can escape this line of becoming more and more perfect. It's something which has been predestined. We're all moving towards perfection. But whether we move towards perfection in vice or virtue, that's our own doing. And that concerns the realm of the soul. But in the physical realm of existence, whatever you see around you, all these things, these are good. And it's all on a line with perfection and the overall perfection of the creative order of the cosmos. Nothing is futile. Whatever is created is good. Everything is bil-haqq. And it's all Allah's mercy. Now, as we progress, these will become digested, inshallah, as we go through these discussions. Okay. Now, so in and of itself, whatever creation you encounter in the realm of creation, it's good. In and of itself. But when you compare it with something else, when you look at a particular form of creation, not in and of itself, but relative to something else, there are two ways, there are two reasons why one may do this, why one may compare X creation with another form of creation. This comparing may be in line with your progress towards perfection and incorporating the divine attributes of perfection, or it may not. And it may be in line with you in your perfection in vice, not virtue. When you compare things with one another for the reason of saying, I am better than that thing, or X is better than Y thing, this can cause problems for you. This is the estimative, if you remember that faculty we discussed when we were discussing the taming of the inner faculties. One of them was the estimative, wahmiyya faculty, where it always compares things based on whether it's good for me or it's not good for me. Here, if you compare things, judge things in a manner which is not on a par with perfection, this is going to cause problems. This, as a result of these kind of comparisons, especially when it's not in line with you becoming more and more perfect in virtue, such comparisons, such making comparisons, is termed vice. This is shar. The Quranic terminology is shar. So shar, which I'll translate for now as vice, but I'll enter the exact meaning of what shar means, because in most Quranic translations it translates it as evil. And that distances one from the Quranic meaning and wisdom behind this term, shar. But when you keep on comparing, and it's not on a par with you becoming more perfect in virtue, this comparing, what arises from it is vice. But this vice is not vice in and of itself. It arose because of you seeing something relative to something else. That's very important. And in addition to seeing something relative to something else, the result was you becoming more distanced from absolute perfection, more distanced from acquiring the divine attributes of perfection. That we call shar, or vice. But sometimes no, you may compare two things, but this comparing doesn't lead you to be distanced from Allah. It makes you even become more closer to Allah. That is not shar. That is in line with your perfection in virtue. That is khair. That's virtue. Now, here, when we look at the term shar in the Arabic dictionaries and in the Arabic lexicons of old, of the earlier lexicographers, there, in relation to the term shar, it has a number of pivotal aspects. The definition has a number of essential pillars. One is shar, is when something is inferior in value. There's a disadvantage to this action, for example. And it may even apply to people, but that has to be explained. I'll explain that in a minute. But in relation to anything, when it's disadvantaged, or by that I mean it's inferior in value, in ethics, for example, or in other things, that is one essential aspect to the term shar. And note, you can only say something is disadvantaged or it's inferior in value when you've compared it with something else. That's the other point. And finally, in relation to the term shar, which broadly we're translating as vice for now, but there's a more precise translation which I want to acquaint you with. With any given shar, the pure innate nature, that which is on a par with perfection in virtue, they never show inclination towards it because it's inferior for them. It has a disadvantage for them. They are more inclined towards virtue. They're not inclined towards something which is lesser compared to something else. Something which has less excellence, less superiority. So with any given shar, another essential dimension is that the person does not show any inclination towards it. So with a given medication or surgery, an operation, even though these kind of things may entail a lot of bitterness or pain, we never call these things shar, because there's no intrinsic disadvantage or inferiority to a medication whose purpose is to make you feel better or make you recover from an illness. And that's why people do incline towards medication or surgery or such procedures. They do incline because the purpose is has an advantage to it. There's no intrinsic disadvantage or inferiority. And that's why people, they are inclined towards doctors and medication and so on and so forth. Even though it may have a lot of side effects. But when you look at it from its purpose, you are inclined towards it. So just because something is bitter or entails pain won't make it qualify as vice, won't make it qualify as something which is shar. That's the first point. So that's in relation to the definition. Now with this definition of shar that I've given, let's see if it qualifies in relation to three different scenarios. One is, does it apply to things or acts of creation or created entities, would this apply to them? Would shar apply to creation when you look at creation in and of itself? Well, inshallah, you should answer, and you should have answered already, that this is impossible. Because all that is existence. There's nothing outside the jurisdiction of existence. Nothingness is impossible. Non-existence is impossible. It's all existence. And so, when you look at any given manifestation of pure existence, any creation, to say that is shar, to say that is vice, when you look at that creation in and of itself, that would be totally impossible. See, I'm trying to suggest a Tawheedi worldview. I want you to learn how to encounter these events around you. So, in relation to different forms of creation that surround you, when you look at it in and of itself, you should always be recalling Allah, automatically. And here, we've read certain aspects of certain du'as before in this regard, that Allah is making Himself acquainted with us through all these forms of creation. So, in relation to creation in and of itself, it's impossible to apply the term vice, because when you look at it in and of itself, it's all good. It has to be all good. Okay. Then, sometimes in the Quran, we see the term shar referred to creatures like humans. We see the term shar is used. For example, in chapter 8, verse 55, Inna sharra dawab indallah alladhina kafaru. Verily, the vicious, those who have vice, amongst the creatures before Allah are those who disbelieve. فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, and they will never believe, they won't believe. Here the Quran is calling the disbelievers as shar, as vicious people, as vice, attributing vice to people. Now, when you look at any person in and of it themselves, they're a manifestation of Allah's attributes. Therefore, when you look at it in that light, it's good, it's all mercy, it wasn't created in vain, it's not futile, and therefore we can't apply the term vice. But when we see the Quran is applying vice to a person, when the Quran has said that Allah has made everything that He's created as good, and anything encompasses Allah's mercy and nothing else, here, this vice, how are we going to interpret it now? Or for example, in chapter 113 verse 2, min sharri ma khalaq. I seek refuge, for example, in the earlier verse is mentioning a number of things that you want to seek refuge from the vice of that which Allah has created. The translations here are very strange sometimes. Some translators have said, from the harm in that which Allah has created. Some people use the term evil, from the evil of that which He has created. That which is created, such as creatures, humans, they may be attributed with the term vice here in these two verses. Chapter 8, verse 55, chapter 113, verse 2. Now, here, when you see the term shar used, it means you're not looking at that creature in and of him or herself. Otherwise, the term shar, if you remember, only applies when you're comparing it with something else. Here the Quran is comparing these creatures with someone else. Only when these creatures are seen relative to something else, then you can call them shar. But in and of themselves, you can never call them shar. They're all good according to the Quran. Remember the story of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. He couldn't find anything better, more good, creation-wise, than the corpse of a dog. Because creation-wise, that has no difference with a whole hoard of gold, for example. So what is this creature seen relative to in order for that creature to be attributed the term shar or vice? And here it's relative to those who believe and who act on a par with their innate nature. Those who, by following their innate nature, their fitrah, become closer to Allah, incorporate more attributes of perfection, journey towards absolute perfection in virtue. And this creature who disbelieves, when we see that creature relative to these believers, here the term shar is used. So, if a person does not act accordingly with one's fitrah and is distanced from attributes of perfection, that creature can be called shar. But they're called shar not in and of themselves. They're called shar in secondary terms. By secondary terms, I mean relative to those people, those believers who are close with Allah, or close to their journeying towards perfection is more enhanced, and they are they are incorporating more and more attributes of perfection. These disbelievers, relative to them, they are called shar. So the first point here is, shar doesn't qualify in relation to any given thing, but it can't apply to any given thing when you look at that thing in and of itself, but it can apply to a thing when you look at that thing relative to something else. And this is very important. When you look at the translations of shar in the Quran, you feel that the translator has translated as if evil exists, as if vice, shar, exists. Whereas no, it doesn't exist in the external realm. You're seeing something relative to something else. Shar is a mental construct, like ownership. Ownership doesn't exist in the external realm. But we construct the idea of ownership so that every person has their own piece of land. They have harmony, peace, tranquility. No one can take that land away from them. That's why we construct ownership. But it's a mental construct. Nothing in the physical realm of creation is termed ownership. There's a house, there's a land, there's a person, but you can't point to something and say, this is ownership. But the purpose behind these mental constructs, such as ownership, is that the person, relaxed, tranquil in their own land, no one can take it from them. Now they can get closer to Allah in peace. That's why we construct these mental ideas. Vice is also a mental construct. And the purpose here, like ownership, where the purpose behind mentally constructing ownership was for one to get closer to Allah, progress further in the line of perfection in virtue, shar is also a mental construct with a purpose, warning you that this would be shar when you see it relative to this, and you should avoid this mental construct by not incorporating attributes which distance you from progressing further and further in the line of perfection in virtue. And therefore the Sharia terms certain acts as vice. But it's all in relation to the realm of your soul. It's all in line with your soul getting closer and closer with Allah. Not that a certain creation in the realm of creation in and of itself is vice. This is very important. Okay, that was one other issue we wanted to mention. Now, so sometimes vice is attributed to a creature in and of themselves, that we say it's impossible. Sometimes it's attributed to a person, we say that's secondary in nature. We're looking at that person relative to another person, and there we say this person is vice. That's okay. It's a mental construct. Now, sometimes we call actions. In the Quran, we see cases where actions or effects which arise, those actions are called vicious or vice. Now, these actions may be divided into two classes. Sometimes there are actions which are, and this is a very important word now, I'm suggesting this word for a translation of shar. Sometimes actions arise from aberrations in legislation. Sometimes actions arise from aberrations in the creative order of the cosmos. Legislation means the do's and don'ts which Allah has assigned. If you commit yourself and do all the do's, you incorporate more and more divine attributes of perfection. You become more Allah-like. Your proximity to Allah is enhanced. If you don't commit yourself to the do's and you contaminate yourself with the don'ts, you're aberrating, becoming distanced from that legislation which Allah has assigned, and His divine satisfaction lies in that legislative protocol. Any aberration, diversion, any aberration from the in legislation, in the legislative domain, that is called shar. It's an aberration. So, in the domain of legislation, there are a set of actions that you have to do to get closer to Allah. Whenever an action arises in this, when you look at it through this lens, an action arises from you aberrating or someone else aberrating from Allah's assigned legislative protocol, that action is called vice. But this is also seen relative to those actions which are on a par with Allah's legislative protocol. So, when someone steals something, when you look at that action, which is one of Allah's creation, when you look at the action itself, we say it's good. And that action is manifesting one of Allah's attributes. Al-Model, the misguider. But Allah misguides those who want misguidance. يُضِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ. So when you look at the action in and of itself, it existentially is traced back to Allah. But when you look at this action in this sense that this person has opted for something which has led to an aberration from Allah's legislative command, then that action is called vice. And that person's realm of his or her soul is becoming more and more distant from Allah. That's a vice, an aberration. Sometimes in Allah's creative order of the cosmos, which is all based on cause and effect, what we see is an aberration from the best manner of the order of the cosmos progressing. We see an aberration arising here. For example, this is just an example, you may think of better ones, that the direction that the earth rotates around the sun, let's say one day it rotates in the other direction. This is not impossible. Even Stephen Hawking, in his book The Grand Design, he alludes to this. He alludes to the phenomenon that Nabi Joshua, Yusha, and Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, these two are known where they, through their powers that Allah had assigned to them, there were scenarios where they made the earth rotate in the other direction. It's known as the Raddu Shams. And there, when Stephen Hawking mentions Joshua, he doesn't mention Amirul Mu'mineen, but when he mentions Joshua and the story of Joshua, he doesn't regard it as impossible. Actually, it's regarded as rationally possible. But he believed it's implausible for reasons because of his background knowledge in Tawheed. That's okay. But for a physicist of that nature to say that it's not impossible rationally, that's very important. Now, if this was to be the norm, this would be an aberration from the creative order of existence. Or for example, when certain foods that only grow in certain seasons, and then you genetically manipulate them so that they grow in all seasons. This may, in many cases, be an aberration from the creative order of existence, of the cosmos. So aberration can apply in the legislative domain, and it may apply in the creative order of the cosmos. In both cases, the term vice, in relation to those actions which result from aberrations in the legislative domain or the creative order of the cosmos, the term vice applies here. Okay. Now, let's now give two examples and now slowly introduce the coronavirus. With earthquakes, when you look at earthquakes, the scientist will say that this is part of the creative order of the cosmos. That if there were no earthquakes, the order of the cosmos, it would lead to aberrations. And that with earthquakes or volcanoes or the like, these are natural phenomena based on cause and effect, which enhance the overall creative order of the cosmos. It's like, for example, if you see the whole world, the whole cosmos, like those ecology chains that you may have studied in biology, where if in the ecology chain you take a certain link which doesn't seem pleasing to you, it's usually mentioned, these chains of ecology, for example, in the animal kingdom. For example, you don't like the mouse or the spider. You said, why did Allah, for example, create such creatures? But if you take them out of the chain, it would cause a lot of aberrations in the overall order of the cosmos. Because each of these have its own purpose. And without them, the overall order of ecology would be compromised. So taking them out would be would qualify as an aberration, would be vice. Now earthquakes too, it's an essential part of the creative order of the cosmos. So, since it's an essential order, it's not an aberration, we see it as good. It can't qualify as vice when you look at it in and of itself. And since it's in line with the overall perfection of the cosmos, when you want to compare it with something else, you have to compare it in a manner which you don't compromise the maximum enhancement or perfection of the overall creative order of the cosmos. But this earthquake may threaten my life. That earthquake is necessary. It's good. It's part of the order of the cosmos. But now it may threaten my life. What must I do? First of all, this action of your life being threatened by the earthquake, you can't call that action vice either. But when you look at the action in and of itself, but now your life is threatened, you have a legislative duty. Look, now we're focusing on the person who is encountering being threatened by a natural phenomenon, such as an earthquake. So here you now have to protect yourself, but that's your legislative duty. If you were not to protect yourself, this not protecting yourself, when it's seen relative to protecting your life and enhancing your perfection and virtue, this not protecting yourself, that would be seen as vice. That would qualify if you don't meet your duty. And the reason why that's seen as vice, because Allah has assigned a decreed term for every individual. For example, He has decreed an individual to die at 80 or 90 or 85 years of age. Some lower, some more. And since we don't know when this decreed term, this ajal, has come, has arrived, we have to always endeavor to protect ourselves until we attain to that decreed term. Compromising our lives and thus not reaching the decreed term assigned for us would be seen as vice in legislative terms. And therefore, the earthquake, there's nothing wrong with that. It may take away our loved ones, but that's only natural. Their decreed term may have arrived. Even if it hasn't arrived, it won't justify you complaining or groaning. Such complaining, it only results because of one's egoism. Why does the same person not complain when thousands die on the other side of the world through an earthquake? But they may express extensive sorrow when their own loved ones dies. This is traced back to one's egoism. Look here, egoism is an aberration in that legislative command of duty. So here, since we don't know if our decreed term has arrived or not, we have to protect ourselves when an earthquake comes. And if we don't, that would be deemed as vice. But the earthquake itself, when you look at the earthquake, there's no aberration there. The aberration happens in how we look at the earthquake and how we treat ourselves. Now, with the coronavirus, all this was a preface to this point. And inshallah, tomorrow we'll look at the coronavirus from another angle, whether it qualifies as divine punishment, divine adhab or not. But right now, this coronavirus, either it was man-made or it was a natural phenomenon. Assuming it was man-made, this would be an aberration in the creative order of the cosmos. And in that circumstance, it would be accurate to say that this man-made virus qualifies as vice. Why? Because there's an aberration here from the overall order of the cosmos. It's diverted from that perfection which is on a par with how the cosmos should progress. So here, this would be on a par with the term vice. It would qualify as vice because of the existing aberration. Yes, when you look at it in and of itself, it's good. But when you look at it compared to relative to other things, in this instance, it's an aberration from that overall order of the cosmos. Here you say this is vice, but you're looking at it relative to the perfect order of the cosmos. So here vice would qualify, and such a phenomenon would not be on a par with Allah's divine satisfaction, even though providentially, when you look at the virus in and of itself, even if it's man-made, it's good, because it's Allah's creation. But when you look at it relative to something else, then that's where the vice qualifies, and here that something else is the aberration from the overall order of the cosmos. Or the coronavirus may be a natural phenomenon, arising naturally through natural cause and effects. It wasn't man-made, it's nature taking its course. Here, there would be no aberration here, because illnesses are part of nature. It's like survival of the fittest, if you like. It's part of nature. It's how the overall order of things progress. And here, like with the man-made scenario, irrespective of the scenario, whether it's man-made or natural, one of them was an aberration, the other wasn't. That's the first point. But irrespective of either, here you have that duty to protect yourself. Because if you don't protect yourself, that would be an aberration from the legislative command. Why would it be an aberration? Because here you don't know whether your decreed term has arrived or not. You have a duty to attain to your maximum decreed term. And if you aberrate in this legislative command of duty, here your action would be deemed as vice. So if you don't do the social distancing, if you don't abide by hygiene, and so on and so forth, that would be vice. But if it's a natural phenomenon, it's all good in and of itself. Even if it's man-made, it's all good in and of itself. But with the man-made one, there's an aberration in relation to the order of the cosmos. With the natural one, there is no aberration. So vice with the natural phenomenon does not qualify. With the man-made phenomenon, it does qualify. Okay, now, if it's of the natural type, we have to be polite, we have to be patient before Allah's wisdom, and just do our duty. If it's of the man-made type, we still have to do our duty and be patient, but we have an added responsibility. We have to speak out when we see any aberration in the domain of legislation, be it in the political field or in the external medical atmosphere. When we see, although this is not established, but these conspiracy theorists, one thing that they do is very good. When they look at an aberration happening from the overall order of the cosmos, and they then go against it, that's a very noble endeavor. But they have to do it logically, in a rational framework. Sometimes their ego may get in the way, and then this may lead to extremist tendencies, where they start doing things which are not in line with their legislative duty. But wherever one sees an aberration, be it in the legislative domain or in the order of the cosmos, it's one's duty to speak out. When we see an aberration in Palestine, for example, and their rights being trampled upon, we have a duty to speak out. Silence would be polluting or contaminating our souls. When we see an aberration in the order of the cosmos, for example, if the claim is proved that someone has this virus was made in a lab with an unethical, vicious intention in mind, we have to speak out. And if we don't, we have aberrated from our legislative duty and we become more and more distant from Allah. Think about it. These duties are very important. But vice, shar, entails an aberration. Okay, inshallah we'll continue with this coronavirus from another angle, inshallah, tomorrow. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.